All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, CodeShip for CloudBees. I'm just going to let everyone know a few things up top before we start. I'm not going to take too long. One, we are recording. So for any reason you need to drop or you have a colleague who's unable to join, there will be a recording made available of this later on. There's also going to be time at the end for questions. So if you think of any questions as we go, please feel free to put them right into the question panel on your control panel, and we'll get to them at the end. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Ethan? So before we begin, just like to introduce our speakers real quick. We have Brian Dawson, a DevOps evangelist here at CloudBees, and we have Ethan Jones in product management. They're going to walk you through everything you need to know and help with the questions at the end. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Brian Dawson. Brian?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Max. Thanks for our attendees. Thanks to our attendees for joining. So I want to start out talking a bit about kind of the state of our world, right? We're in a situation where organizations are under increasing pressure to innovate, and this is impacting developers, development teams, shared services teams, and IT organizations overall. And people are looking to DevOps, continuous integration, and continuous delivery to help them move faster and innovate. However, when we take a closer look at the numbers, we find, based on a survey we recently conducted of roughly 1,200 developers and DevOps engineers, that while 67% of people came to practice DevOps, only 49% are practicing CD. And last year, this is an improvement, whereas last year 47% claimed to practice DevOps and only 38% practice CD. What the trend is showing is that while people are working to improve, to leverage CD to increase their speed and ability to innovate, still over half of our respondents, and in some surveys it'll reflect still over half of the market, has yet to adopt continuous delivery practices. Extending this concept to look at an overall organization, and I know that this slide is a bit complicated, we'll take a look at what we identified in the survey as high velocity practitioners. High velocity practitioners are those that are deploying multiple times per week. They spend only a fraction of their time on unplanned work, and they have a high level of collaboration amongst their teams. We find that those high velocity practitioners, or those high performers in our context, have gone beyond just practicing continuous delivery and continuous integration on single work groups, to the point where 40% implement CI in multiple work groups and 44% implement continuous delivery, or CD, on multiple work groups. Moreover, if we extend that to see who has gone beyond multiple work groups, we actually had noted on the earlier slide that 32% of those organizations, or 51%, excuse me, have fully standardized on continuous integration. This means they have found a way to practice it across a wide application portfolio. All of their teams practice continuous integration. And for CD, that number is 32%, which is a significant difference from the average of 18%. So this leads me to point out why we're talking about CodeShip today. What we've seen is that we have a number of different organizations, small and large, new, and those that have been around for 50 plus years, that are looking to adopt modern practices, but yet not all of them are at a point where they could say they're practicing them across all teams. However, there is a need in practically every corner of these organizations' application portfolio across all of their development teams to be able to implement these practices. So today we're talking about CodeShip because CloudBees is sharing CodeShip with you as part of an overall suite that is growing to recognize the difference in the state of organizations in the market and different needs. And we're growing our suite to meet those needs. Whether your need is visibility across multiple teams, high level of governance, ensured security, sharing of best practices, and or providing a self-service solution that developers can get on quickly to enable speed while also enabling customizability between our existing suite, CloudBees Core, and CodeShip, with each, and I'll share with you today in more details. We're bringing you a set of solutions that can address your varied needs. And I think, Ethan, you're going to go ahead and take some time to drill into some more detail on CodeShip.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. Like Max said at the start, I'm in product management specifically for CodeShip. And so what I want to do kind of out of the gate here is talking about what CodeShip is and what CodeShip is not. And we'll look at how CodeShip might fit into your organization. And then we'll take a look at CodeShip itself with a quick product demo. So just starting out, what is CodeShip? CodeShip specifically is a simple, fast, and turnkey hosted CI/CD. So it's a SaaS hosted CI/CD tool, and it's really focused on how quick you can get going. So with CodeShip, you can get going in minutes. That's full CI/CD in minutes. No infrastructure to manage, no overhead to set up. You don't need a huge DevOps team to bring to bear on it. CodeShip is really focused on teams that just need to hit the ground running quickly. And then it's high performing. So we don't want you to have build queues. We don't want your developers sitting around waiting. We want builds that run as fast as possible, with you having the flexibility you need to speed those builds up. And then CodeShip is flexible. So one of the things you don't want is you don't want to pick a tool that's great for day 0, but then on day 1, you need to throw everything away and switch to a different tool. We want a tool that can grow with you, and that extends to the wider CloudBees product family as well. So CodeShip, you can get started in just a couple minutes doing everything through a web UI. And then when you're ready, or when you want, you can switch to a full config as code using YAML files with much more flexible workflows and much more flexible environment definition. And both of those ways to interact exist on CodeShip. So you can graduate and you can mature and you can let the product adapt as your team evolves. Now, what CodeShip is not, and this is equally important, is it's not for really mature, complex, large applications inside of larger organizations. I'm talking teams that have a bunch of manual reviews, handoffs, security and governance processes needed, Q&A teams. As you get into the size of organization that has those kind of things between you and production, CD is very important. And that's what CloudBees Core inside of CloudBees is for. So CodeShip is not for those types of projects. It's also not for projects that need on-premise builds on your infrastructure. So you can use on-premise source control with CodeShip, but the builds are going to run in the CodeShip cloud, not on your own infrastructure. So it's not a great fit for projects that have a high level of security or governance need in that way. And then as of today, CodeShip doesn't support Windows builds or mobile apps. We do have a lot of plans to expand the use cases CodeShip encompasses going forward. But today, these are going to be the kind of limitations you'll see with CodeShip. And the reason I bring that up is because there are multiple solutions within the CloudBees family. And what we're talking about is the right solution for each project on your team. So historically, you have to kind of pick the solution for your most extreme use case, and every other project has to fall in line. What CloudBees is saying is every project has a unique context, and you should be able to solve that within one product family without needing to force some projects into suboptimal workflows. So one thing I want to bring up here is we just said CodeShip is not necessarily great for these large, complicated enterprise projects. So why would an enterprise company want a simple no-ops SaaS tool kind of like this if some of your projects, or even a lot of your projects, aren't able to use them? And as I said, not every team and project is going to have those needs, even inside of your organization. Your organization is going to have projects that maybe don't need the security team. Maybe they're only getting into these larger workflows because you don't have a better solution for them. Or maybe you're even seeing some vendor sprawl at this point, where those teams and those projects are simply not being accommodated by those kinds of resources, and they're kind of left on their own. So we'll dig into those scenarios a bit more, but these are reasons you might say CodeShip could be a good fit inside your organization for some projects and teams. And I know Brian specifically spends a lot of time out there talking to DevOps folks around the world. And Brian, I'm curious if you had anything you wanted to add at this point.
Yeah, absolutely, Ethan. And this is sort of an anecdotal reason that I have shared with a number of people. So I do hear first, just to set up generally, about varied needs, some of those which are going to go into a little bit further. But to share a conversation that I had last year at Jenkins World with one of your largest healthcare organizations, I can't name, but they had come to me and said, hey, look, we want to scale CD across our organization. We've been given a mandate by our CIO to do that. However, I have a shared services group of, I don't remember exactly, roughly 20 to 25 engineers. We literally have thousands of development teams. There's no way that we can keep up with onboarding those teams at the rate at which they want to be onboarded, at the rate at which they want to adopt these practices. Well, if at that time we had this option available to them, what I would have suggested is that you go ahead and for your high priority teams that need more bespoke workflows and or they have to fit within your governance structure, go ahead and onboard them into your full solution. But in the interim, for teams like your web dev teams that don't necessarily need the governance or are more able to self-serve themselves, provide them a solution like CodeShip so they can get on, they can get started, they can begin to increase velocity and be in the fold, so to say. And then you're well positioned to have a relationship with those teams such that when their needs grow and they're ready to mature and your team has capacity, you can onboard them into the more standardized solution within the organization. So the idea is that you don't have to hold teams up and be a bottleneck for those teams based on your capacity. You can give them a sort of approved solution right away.
Awesome. Yeah, let's take a look in more detail because I think that's a great example for this kind of first use case we want to look at here. So there's a few use cases where CodeShip might make a lot of sense. And this first one is kind of what Brian's touching on there, which is new projects or teams. And I think Brian did a great job illustrating this backlog of teams that you're trying to onboard into CI/CD projects. So I don't want to necessarily repeat that part of it because I think Brian covered that especially well. Another lens on that to think about is just new projects, period. So greenfield projects, R&D projects. These things often aren't deploying anywhere other than staging or dev environments, and they're not going to be for a long time. Now, they do still have to deploy somewhere because they have their staging and dev and test environments, and they're wanting to do CI and automated testing and deploying to those environments from day one. So what you don't want to do is tell those teams, either A, you can't really get to work in an efficient way until the people who are also working on our critical high priority projects are ready to help you, or B, just solve it however you want, add new vendors, add new tools, and we'll deal with the problem later when your project is more mature. So in addition to trying to onboard full teams into your best practices, you want these new projects that teams are coming up with to have really good practices from day one, but also to be empowered to run on their own. So the developers on these greenfield projects can do their own CI/CD. They're not bottlenecked. They don't need to look for anyone else or ask for help from anyone else. And you're still inside the CloudBees family. So you're not getting that vendor sprawl situation. And you know that when you are ready to graduate these projects to really high regulation or security needs, if they have those eventually, we're here and we're ready and we can graduate those projects within our product family. Now, another great use case is some projects just don't need those expensive resources or needs, period. So inside of any organization, there's a lot of software you ship, and these could be things like documentation, web front ends, marketing apps, marketing sites, anything maybe that doesn't touch billing or user data. You probably have a lot of software that does need to get shipped, maybe even has testing around it. but doesn't actually need your security, your governance, your compliance teams, your shared services or DevOps teams really in there overseeing them, because the risk is just not that high. And typically what happens today is one of a few bad options for those, which we'll look at in just a moment. But we don't really want to let those people have to solve the problem any way they want, where it gets a little bit Wild West in some corners of your engineering team. And we don't really want to tell them that they need to be a tax on people that maybe have really important and critical software they need to oversee. So this is another case of the type of projects that maybe you can put all of this work in the developer's hands. Let them run their own CI/CD, build it out the way they need, be really efficient, be really smart. It's fast and simple and flexible in a way that maybe a full-blown CI/CD solution built for more high-end requirements would be a little cumbersome for them to have to work with. So CodeShip here is really optimized for these kind of projects and teams to really give them a great experience while still letting you enforce the type of great CI/CD practices you want in your organization. Up until now, in both of these cases, as we've kind of touched on, there's really just three things you've had to choose from, which is you have to resort to vendor sprawl, shadow IT, unmanaged tools. Everybody's putting different tools on different credit cards if you're not able to centralize it. Some teams are doing things one way in one family, some teams are doing things in a different product family. This is not such a big problem when it first starts out. It can be a little bit liberating to tell the teams they have control. But as that problem grows and matures, you can end up with hundreds of engineers on a tool that is not in line with what the rest of your engineering team is doing. And it becomes a pretty big problem pretty quickly. Now, another problem you might have is that they're just bottlenecked. So you say you're not going to let them go that route, so they just need to get in line and wait. And then they have to work in a very inefficient, bogged down way until you're able to peel off expensive resources from critical projects to help these people that are maybe still working on new projects or lower sensitivity projects. So it's hard for them to get the priority they need, but you still need them to wait in line. Or you've had to just give them that time and resources, put them on the expensive CI/CD infrastructure, the expensive CI/CD headcount that you need to set them up. When I say expensive, I don't just mean financial, I mean in terms of where time is being taken from. So in this world, what we're talking about is it would be great if your shared services or DevOps folks could spend all of their days only on the stuff that really, really needs them. And here's CodeShip as a solution so that everybody who isn't most critical to those people can still have great CI/CD that works really, really well for them without necessarily needing to keep handing that ball back and forth with them or filing tickets or filing requests. Now, I know all three of these, again, Brian, you've probably spent a lot of time talking to teams that had these problems. So I wanted to, I don't know if there's anything you necessarily want to add here or speak to.
I mean, I think for the most part, you hit it really, really, really well. I guess what I would add is for those of those here that are on the call and tasked with supporting teams and developers, at the end of the day, all of these options play out to a situation where you risk not being positioned as servicing your developers, development teams, and organizations well, but either being responsible for the sprawl, being responsible for slowing down progress, or misspending your budget. So in a way, avoiding these three bad options is not just an issue of enabling the developers and development teams, which is extremely important, but by extension, it's an issue of you being positioned to be viewed as servicing your teams as you best can. So that's all I did.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Now, very quickly, I'm going to jump into CodeShip in just a minute and give y'all an actual kind of look at what it looks like, and then we'll talk about how you can get started with it. One of the things we probably should have mentioned up top, but it's good to know that if you're an existing CloudBees customer, you are already entitled to CodeShip, so it comes with your CloudBees subscription as of a few weeks ago. That's an exciting change we made. So it's sitting there ready for you to use, and we'll talk about how you can take advantage of it. One thing a lot of people have been asking us, though, and I want to make sure we cover this before we jump into how the product works, is does CodeShip integrate with my existing CloudBees Jenkins products or with Jenkins, period? And the answer to that is not yet. And we want to be very transparent about this. So we don't want to mislead you about what your experience today will be, but we do plan to do those things. We want within all of CloudBees products. So not just CodeShip and the Jenkins products, but also DevOptics, where your data is going to live, and even across your support issues. We want you to have centralized team management, centralized billing, visibility across everything happening, no matter what product or team or solution it's using. We plan to build those kind of integrations across the suite. So you can go from one CloudBees tool to another. You can migrate from CodeShip to a Jenkins-based project on CloudBees Core. All of that is definitely in the works for us. It's not there today, which doesn't mean you're stuck. If you start on CodeShip and you want to migrate, easy for us to help you with. Our support team is happy to do it. At the end of the day, we're talking about two different forms of config as code that are pretty easy to bridge the gap, and won't be the first time we've had to migrate those projects. So until all these mature product integrations are ready, we know that we're going to need to assist you, and we're more than happy to do so. The cool thing about this that I want to add, though, is that if you were to pick up CodeShip today, you can help us drive what those seamless experiences and integrations look like. This is, as you know, very early for us. CodeShip joined the CloudBees family last year. So if you want to participate, if you want to provide feedback, how do you want to add a simple tool like CodeShip into your organization that's also using more powerful tools? You have every ability to jump in, get in touch with us, and tell us what you want to see these products do together. So we're looking for those kind of feedback and opinions to help us drive our products going forward. Now I'm going to take a minute, and I'm actually going to jump into what CodeShip looks like and how you configure it. And then we'll talk about how you can get started with it, and we'll take some questions as we wrap up. So I will go over here. And what we see here is the actual dashboard for CodeShip. So this is a list of all of my builds. You can see if the build succeeded or if it failed. I can do things like reset the cache or restart it. I can jump in very quickly into my build history. And if I wanted to, I can click on any log line there and get a direct link to it. So very clean, very simple, very straightforward. Another thing I want to highlight is what our YAML configuration here looks like. So with CodeShip, as I said, we have a very simple web UI, and this is probably going to apply more in your use case, we have the config as code option where we configure everything through these two YAML files. The service YAML file, you're essentially building containers based on Docker Compose syntax because we don't like reinventing the wheel where we don't need to. And these containers are going to be your build environment. And earlier we talked about how flexible CodeShip can be, especially compared to other SaaS tools. And that's because the containers are your build environment. So while we do have a turnkey build environment you can use to get started with a bunch of stuff pre-installed, long-term, you can actually use containers like we see here to dictate absolutely everything you want in your build environment, which means any tool or any service that you can put in a container, you can use on CodeShip, even though it's fully hosted, which is much more flexible than you might be used to with SaaS tools like CodeShip. So as you can see here, I've defined some containers, and then over in my steps file, I just tell those containers what my pipeline looks like. Send this container this command, and then next, if that passes, send this one this command. And then I can use containers, in this case, Heroku. If it's AWS, if it's Google Cloud, we have starter images I'll look at for all of those things, and send it these commands. So this is the deployment. Now, if you're wondering how this works, I'll speak to it briefly, and I don't want to take all of your time here today on a really in the weeds demo. If you're interested, you can certainly get in touch with your accounts team, and we'll give you a one-on-one demo where we can really dive into how you need to configure CodeShip. But essentially, anything you're trying to do, you build a container that can do it. So in this case, I've got a container with the Heroku SDK in it. If it's AWS, I put the AWS CLI in a container, and that's going to be your pattern and practice for doing anything on CodeShip. So very straightforward YAML syntax, as you see there. The UI you can see is incredibly simple and efficient. You can easily add notifications, Slack, custom webhook, anything you need with a whole lot of custom events such as failed, restart, those kind of things. Within our build trigger screen, if you want to run build only on PRs or on every commit, you can do that. And you can specify what branches to use, either through including or excluding certain branches. Now, there's a whole lot more features to CodeShip than we see here. As I said, I'm not going to dive deep into the weeds here. I just kind of want to give you a quick look so you can see it's got a lot of flexibility. But for the types of teams we've talked about up until now, hopefully you can see how straightforward this is and how empowering it could be for them to have access to a simple tool like that. Now, if I hop over here, how you get started with CodeShip. So all CloudBees customers have an upgraded CodeShip account that's included with their subscription by default. This is super exciting. All you need to do is get in touch with your accounts team. What we're happy to do is schedule demo calls, work with you on proof of concepts, answer any technical questions you have. We're ready to help you get CodeShip added to your organization for the types of projects it makes sense for, or just to feel out, can CodeShip do the things you need it to do? It never hurts, and we're always excited to give you a demo and get your feedback. If there's something CodeShip doesn't do, we'd love to hear that too, so that we can find out for you what would make a solution like this more valuable. And that's actually about it for today. We're happy to take any questions you have.
All right, thanks, Ethan. We have a few here, and of course, everyone, just so you know, please feel free to continue asking as we go. So I want to start off with a couple that are related. One would be, where is the CodeShip plugin, or excuse me, where will the CodeShip plugin appear in Jenkins?
That's a really good question. And one thing to note is CodeShip actually doesn't integrate with Jenkins at all. It's a totally separate system at this point. So CodeShip is a hosted SaaS end-to-end tool that does not tie into Jenkins. We have the build environment. We have the build runner. You can think of it as being something you would deploy alongside rather than with your Jenkins install. But we do plan to make it easy for you to port projects into CodeShip, out of CodeShip, into Jenkins, out of Jenkins. And we're working as a company to let you manage your teams and your billing and your permissions across both your Jenkins installs and your CodeShip teams. So that's all in the works from a product strategy direction.
Great. So that actually already answered one or two of the other questions that came in. But just can you expand a little bit, or just touch back on what you feel the benefits and what people get out of CodeShip are for CodeShip?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about CodeShip, there's a whole group of projects and teams that maybe don't need the most powerful CI/CD in the world. You can maybe think of some kind of analogy of a car versus a pickup truck, depending on the work you're trying to do. And CodeShip is really optimized in being a great experience for people that can use SaaS end-to-end hosted tools, for people that maybe have simpler workflows as they go from testing to deployment. Maybe they don't need the security team, the auditing, the governance. Maybe their requirements overall are just a lot simpler. So what CodeShip is aiming to do really is put the developers on those teams, put in their hands something that really empowers them to move fast, control their own workflows, really drive their own automation, and really get the most out of shipping their code that they can, without forcing them to leave the rest of the company entirely. So staying within the CloudBees product family if you're using CloudBees.
Great. And let's actually continue on with that slightly more, because a question just came in that I think is pertinent. So CodeShip is included, but it's not billing for used resources.
That's a great question. So CodeShip does not bill on a per user basis. CodeShip also does not bill on a per minute basis. CodeShip bills based on the throughput you need in any given time. And what I'll say about that is, what that means is, how many builds does your organization need to run simultaneously? So let's say you had 5 concurrent builds on CodeShip. That means your organization could kick off up to 5 simultaneous builds. The infrastructure is managed, so that's where that comes in. And then within those builds, how many parallel steps do you want to have happen? So inside of one of your 5 concurrent builds, do you want to have the ability to parallelize 5 steps, 2 steps, 10 steps? So those are your 2 dimensions for CodeShip billing, is concurrency on the builds and then concurrency within the builds with parallelism. So what's included in your CloudBees plan by default is 3 concurrent builds with 3 parallel steps inside of each build by default. And if you need more resources than that, we can certainly talk to you.
Great. I'm keeping track of all the ones that are coming in, so I'm looking for what we should go over next. I think this one can kind of be a bit of a two-parter, because 2 different people asked this, and I think we can kind of approach it all at once. One question was, can teams collaborate and share practices in CodeShip? Whereas another user mentioned more specifically, they have many temporary projects that spin up and then they go away. They would like an automated solution for teams. Is there any sort of wizard for users to choose the types of CI they want, whether it's security or static analysis or code types, etc.?
Yeah, those are 2 really good questions, and I will answer both of them. Although one comment I want to insert quickly is, as product management for CodeShip, I would love to follow up with y'all specifically and dig into more detail on those specific types of workflows, so we can see exactly what would be really great for y'all. So hopefully we can maybe get in touch with you after this and dig into those a little more deeply. What you can do today, CodeShip has an API for creating projects and setting them up. So you could easily offer scripts or API-based quick setup options to teams with some project perimeter that would make that really easy to get going. We also have, for languages, some starter commands you can easily use. You can choose from Rails, Python, Java, Node, Go, and a handful of other languages and some frameworks in there. You could just one click drop in the most basic starter setup and test commands for those languages. At this point, what we don't have that we're excited to look at in the future is the idea of directly sharing templates inside of the UI, or choosing very customized, like add code coverage. So it's easy to add code coverage with CodeShip. In our documentation, you'll find lots of docs for lots of different code coverage solutions, but we don't have kind of a one-click install for that sort of thing just yet. And we don't have the ability to say, just apply the template from project A to project B. These are all things we're certainly looking at. When you look at the config as code option, that's obviously a little bit easier to reshare, as those are just YAML files.
All right, great. Moving on from there, and I think this is a good one to follow up with since we're talking teams. What is the scaling capability like, and how is that orchestrated?
That's a very good question. So in terms of kicking off builds, that's something you never have to worry about. If you need 150, 200, 300 simultaneous builds or jobs, to use the more traditional language, we handle that. You don't ever deal with the infrastructure. You just tell us what concurrency you need on your account. One of the nice benefits of CodeShip is none of that infrastructure management for scaling is on you. We run the build fleet. We handle all the concurrency. And we've got teams that do get up into those numbers. So CodeShip, as I've said, is typically more for teams on the lower end of the size or complexity spectrum. But we have a lot of happy customers up to the hundreds of engineers that are all using CodeShip on specific teams. So you can think within your organization, you may have way more engineers than that, but specific teams up to the hundreds or high dozens would still be really good fits for CodeShip. And in those cases, it's not uncommon to have several dozen builds in flight at the same time, any given minute of the day. And once again, that's something that you just configure at the account level. It's not something you have to worry about how it orchestrates or how the build machines become available. That's what we take care of for you.
All right, so moving on to this next one here. Can we go somewhere to work with CodeShip before we call our account rep? And is this good for dev, or is there some security, or excuse me, and is there some security to protect? Is it by network bandwidth?
Yeah, so those are good questions. CodeShip is free forever at a free plan. And the free plan is more limited than what comes with your CloudBees plan. So the free plan, you only get one build with one action at a time. So no parallelism inside the build. And any builds after the first one running will queue until that first one's done. But you're more than welcome to go sign up for CodeShip for free and use that free plan to kick the tires. There's a little chat window that pops up in the bottom right. If you want to drop a message and say, hey, I'm a CloudBees customer and I'm testing it out, we can definitely get in touch with you and talk to you about it. And you're more than welcome to take that approach of evaluating it. In our documentation, you'll find quick starts, sample repos, there's proof of concept apps, there's everything you're going to need to hit the ground running very quickly in our documentation. And if you want to get in touch, we can send you those as well. So you definitely don't need to contact your accounts team just to get access. If you want to get the free, the fully upgraded account level that's included with your CloudBees, then your accounts team needs to know so we can turn that on with you. But you can use the CodeShip free plan as much as you want until the point you're ready to get in touch with the accounts team. As far as security goes, so CodeShip connects to 3 source control management tools, GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. It'll connect to the cloud version of those, or it'll connect to your on-premise version of those, as long as you can give us a user token. And then we have what we call a restricted IP mode or option, where you can say use a restricted IP range. We'll give you between 5 and 10 IP addresses that you're going to need to whitelist so that we can pull code from your on-premise or self-managed source control. And then the builds are always going to run in our build fleet. One interesting possibility for us is we'd like the idea to look at orchestrating inside of perhaps your cloud later in CodeShip's development. We're not quite there yet. So today, from a security perspective, you have to be comfortable with these types of projects running on our cloud, but the source control at rest can stay in your private source control as long as you can whitelist a few IPs to have full access from it.
All right, and I want to add 2 quick things to that, just from what I'm seeing on the back end. So we're going to do a few more questions here before we go, but for everyone in the chat, I put the link to the CodeShip blog. We are getting some questions about the use of this in dev or just how developers will work with us in general. The blog has a lot of really great information on this, so I want everyone to be able to see it. We're also getting some requests for more of an in-depth demo. If that's something you want to see, let us know in the questions, and we'll make sure, whether it's another session like this or whether we're reaching out one-on-one, we'll make sure that we get something put together for you. So let's do just a few more questions here before we log off.
And one quick thing before the next question is, if y'all are interested here in the documentation, you'll find getting started is very quick. And then down here, you'll see quick resources for AWS, Azure, Heroku, IBM, Kubernetes, Google Cloud. So our documentation makes those kind of things very simple. And then we've also got a Git repo on GitHub called CodeShip Library. And here you're going to find, you'll see already PHP, AWS, Ruby. We've got sample apps here. We've got major cloud libraries here. Anything you're trying to figure out how to do on CodeShip, chances are you'll find a code example on this CodeShip Library GitHub repo as well.
All right, let's look at maybe 3 more, unless I get some more of these where we've been seeing multiple people asking them. So let's any administration privileges that can overlook all the other projects, be their stats, etc.
Yeah, so that's kind of maybe there's two answers there. CodeShip doesn't have what you might think of as traditional RBAC. It's kind of got 4 permission tiers, which is a read-only tier, a read and write tier where you have some actions, a read and write tier where you have all actions except billing, and then an account owner tier where you can do absolutely everything and see everything. So anybody who's an account owner or is in one of the read and write tiers is going to be able to find every project across the CodeShip team and see the build activity, look at the build logs, things like that. You can, of course, stop people from being able to restart builds where they shouldn't be able to and things like that. So you definitely can give visibility across the whole CodeShip spectrum to certain people on your team. We don't have stats built in at this point. I think it's something we're going to be doing very, very soon. We can do that for you manually as an account team, though. So if you get in touch with us or if you sign up with CodeShip, one of the things we love doing is sending out weekly or monthly emails with, here's how many builds failed, here's how many builds passed, those kind of things. And we fully plan to add that into the product. We're working with the DevOptics team within CloudBees to provide great DevOps data from CodeShip not just from the Jenkins side of the family. So some of that stuff is still to come. One of the other things I want to mention is as CloudBees itself starts to build this cross-team, cross-product rather, team and permission and billing management, one of the things we know we want to do and plan to do is let you view all activity in your org, whether it's on CodeShip or on Jenkins and CloudBees Core. So if you're higher level and you're just trying to see your engineering team activity, we do plan to expose that across our solutions in a centralized way. And that's one of those things that we'd love to hear from you, so you can help us make sure we do that in the correct way.
All right. Are there any tools built in, like security scanning?
We don't have security scanning or code coverage built in, but we've got a lot of great articles you'll find up here in our integrations library. We've worked with most of those tools vendors to make adding them to CodeShip easy. So you'll see here under monitoring articles for adding any of these big players in that space. Code coverage, same thing here. For testing, same thing. So these integrations articles up in our docs, not fully baked into the product, but again, we work with the major players in each of those spaces to make the guides for using them with CodeShip really easy and really quick to implement.
All right, this is kind of a two-parter. So what makes CodeShip different than other GUI-based development tools in organizations, and is integration possible with CloudBees? And I just want to add on to that because another person asked, we're talking a lot about CodeShip. We mentioned that CodeShip comes included with the CloudBees Core subscription. What is the added benefit of having that CloudBees Core subscription with it?
So those are really good questions. First, I'll tackle what the benefits of CodeShip specifically are compared to maybe other tools in the CodeShip kind of space, other maybe SaaS or hosted or UI-based tools. We focus a lot on flexibility. So the UI is great to get started. We want you to be able to get that automation in place in minutes. But this approach we've taken in the YAML files where you can define any container or multiple containers, and those can be in any private registry you want, any public registry you want. We don't care where you store those containers, or we'll build them for you with Docker files. The flexibility you get there is very unique within the hosted space. The fact that you can start with a simple web UI, but go to a format where basically anything you can run in a container you can use on CodeShip, even though it's fully hosted. That's very unique within the hosted space, where typically you're going to see, here's what the tool supports, here's what's in the build environment, and you need to use that. So we're very kind of proud of that spectrum where you can start in a simple way and really mature quite far downfield. And then our builds are really fast. We spend a ton of time on performance. We spend a ton of time on reliability. We don't want you waiting for a build or counting on the service when it's not there. And then our support. We've got an absolutely amazing technical support team that really are developer level support that can dig in with you in a very meaningful way to get your use cases solved or figure out what's going on if you're having any issues. So speed, support, flexibility, and how fast you can get going are really where we put a lot of our energy. As far as the CloudBees Core subscription, CodeShip has a free forever plan, but if you're an existing CloudBees customer, you're going to get a much higher level of CodeShip at no additional cost. And then, of course, we can work with you through all of the existing support channels and account team you're already familiar with and already have a relationship inside of CloudBees. Now, if you're only looking at CodeShip, if you're not a CloudBees customer, I think the conversation there would just be what tool and what budget and what teams make sense for you. And I think that's a conversation we can definitely have one-on-one.
All right, we're still seeing some questions coming in, so let's check on this one. I think this is going to be a really good one to just talk. We talk a lot about the ease of use, and it might be the last one for today, depending on how many more we get. So I'd like to end with, how much time would you estimate it takes a team to get comfortable with CodeShip if they've never done CI/CD before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Depends on what your specific end-to-end use case is, but we've had teams migrate literally dozens of projects from competitors and get the entire migration for every project to fully mature testing and deployment done in less than a week, which we're really proud of. If your team has never interacted with any CI/CD before, I think you'll find that you can get automation in place in well under a day, just following the UI, probably within an hour or so. But I don't want to overpromise because a lot of it is going to come down to what exactly you need and what exactly your use case is. Like I said, our technical support team is really great at working with those kind of teams in those positions and helping you find the quickest path to success there. So that's the kind of thing where almost definitely you can make a lot of progress very quickly, possibly within even hours, maybe even minutes, depending on how simple the use case actually gets for where you want to start. But we'd be really, really happy to talk to you about that and make sure that we get that done in a smart and efficient way for you.
All right. So as we sign off here, Ethan, you want to let everyone know if they're interested in signing up for CodeShip without going through CloudBees, how they do that?
Yep. So if you want to do that not going through CloudBees through your account team at this time, you can just go to CodeShip.com. As I said, it's free forever on that free tier where you get one build up to 100 builds a month, one build at a time. So you can just go to CodeShip.com, connect your source control, and you don't have to do anything else to start creating projects. You can do that in a minute or two. From there, you can upgrade on your own, or you can get in touch with us for a demo, for support, for whatever you need.
All right. So a lot of the questions we're seeing now are really calls for demos. Please feel free to reach out to us directly. We may be able to set something like this up, but if you want to get started sooner, just let us know. I'm actually putting my email directly into the chat right now. Should anyone want to be in touch, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll make sure we get someone there to help you out. Ethan, Brian, I want to say thank you for presenting today, and Ethan, especially thank you for helping with all the questions we had coming in. There's, like I said, there's even more, but it's mostly looking at how we can get a demo. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Ethan, do you have anything you want to say before we go, or?
No, I appreciate everyone's time today. We will definitely work to get you one-on-one demos if you get in touch, and hopefully we can get some public demos scheduled as well. That's great to hear. So thanks y'all for taking the time today.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll talking to you again real soon. Email me if you have anything else you want to follow up with. Thanks.